Hello, and welcome to Sideways. This week, as Martin recuperates from a surgical procedure, I asked him to watch a film about cricket so that we could talk about how we handle situations that feel like they're beyond us. This sparks memories in Martin of times he's been in some of the most famous cricketing countries of the world, with little interest in much, aside from how much cheap rum he could source or how far it was to the bar. Dealing with pressure.
Hello.
How you doing?
All right, thanks.
What are you laughing for?
I'm just imagining you wearing your surgical socks.
Yeah, they're not comfortable, mate. Especially in this heat. I'm gonna have to bring my phone up a bit closer. You're gonna get a weird view of me.
I can only see the top of your head now.
I know, yeah.
And an interesting piece of art above your head, which looks like a cityscape.
It is. It's the New York City skyline with the Twin Towers are still in place.
Did you make that?
I didn't know, but I thought it was quite... I got it in a charity shop, actually, but I liked it because it still had the Twin Towers. So it's, yeah.
I've been to Ground Zero.
Have you?
Yeah. Did you enjoy it? It was a building site at the time. It was kind of in between the Twin Towers going down and them building something new there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've never actually been to America. I don't like their rock. So I avoid going there in case they make me listen to Boston and Styx and stuff. I can't be having nothing to do with that.
I don't think you have to listen to American rock if you go to America. I'll check. There might be some sort of prerequisite on the sort of visa requirements, but I'm not aware of any.
Oh, I expect Trump will make it mandatory.
Probably. I mean, you couldn't go to America at the moment anyway, could you? Because you're convalescing.
No, I am convalescing. Yeah, I thought it was a bit. Yeah, I liked the way that you set this Zoom meeting up, and the heading was "Sideways Hernia Review," which was so it did bring a bit of a cackle. But just if you want to review my hernia, yeah, I'm on day 4 after the operation.
Yeah. How's it feeling?
Recuperating at home, very sore.
Yeah. Well, it will take a while. As I said to you last night, I did check with my son's girlfriend, who, as you know, is in medical school, and she was very helpful. She said, "Yeah, that'll hurt."
Well, thank you very much. It's Lena, isn't it? Yeah, I'm allowed to mention her name.
Yeah, I don't see why not. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank Lena very much for her wonderful insight.
That's what medical training gets you.
Does it? Yeah. There. Just sit you down and say, there, it'll be all right soon.
So anyway, you're doing quite well actually to sort of rise phoenix-like from your sickbed to do this recording.
It does show. Yeah, I'm a professional consummate, but it is almost counterintuitive because I feel that I should be feeling sorry for myself.
Well, you can,
just moping around.
Yeah, well, you can feel sorry for yourself and mope around, but could you do it after we finish doing this?
Okay, yeah, I'll get back to my moping straight afterwards. Yes, anyway, you set me some homework this week, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Well, it was just it was on the spur of the moment, really, because on Sunday I was reading the papers, as you do on a Sunday, and I happened to notice that on the BBC at the weekend they were showing a documentary called The Edge, which I actually watched, I think, last year on my birthday, which is about the trials and tribulations of the England cricket team. So, and you watched it, didn't you?
I did. I mean, I thought it was just because it was just in revenge for me making you watch the Flight film a couple of weeks ago. But no, I did watch it. I mean, it's still on iPlayer at the moment. I found it absolutely fascinating. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's just about the England cricket team being well down in the world rankings, isn't it? And how they rose up to the number 1 spot over a sort of a short 18-month period.
Yes, and people who are listening might think to themselves, "What the hell? Why are you talking about cricket on a podcast that's about addiction and recovery?" But one of the key themes in the documentary is really about how, in this case, professional sportsmen deal with pressure and expectation, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, that's what I gained from it as well. I mean, it was. I think it was. Yeah, we seeing it through different eyes, but the intense system that was brought in by the new coach at that time, Andy Flower, which brought about the results that he required over quite a short period of time. But it was the fallout mentally and emotionally on the players that was immense, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. But I just thought that it was a good opportunity for us to kind of talk about the relationship between addiction and stress and pressure and expectation.
Yeah, good. I mean, it was a fascinating watch, and I thought, hey, at the start of the documentary there, that just before Andy Flower took over, where they'd been on quite boozy tours, hadn't they? And and then it went to quite a strict behavioural discipline regime to bring out the results that he wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? Certainly, if you play amateur sport, and we've spoken about this before in terms of football, and I certainly found it in terms of cricket, that actually a huge part of playing amateur sport is drinking.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I mean, I played for pub teams, which it combined my two favourite things:
football and drinking.
Football and drinking, yeah.
Yeah, although not at the same time necessarily.
Well, you'd be surprised.
You did combine your two favourite things on my stag do when you slide tackled a 7-year-old when we were playing football and drinking at the same time in a little park in Calais.
Yeah, I was playing for England that day. I was on tour.
3 lions on your chest.
Yeah.
The thing that I was kind of interested in, we've talked before, haven't we, about how when people think about addiction or alcoholism, people get this kind of a typical idea of what an alcoholic looks like.
Yeah.
We've also talked about how, alcoholism and addiction crops up where people are put in situations that emotionally they can't deal with. I suppose one of the reasons that I suggested it was I was interested in what your experience of that had been, either personally or with people that you've worked with in recovery.
One of the things which us addicts have great trouble with is dealing with pressure and dealing with stress. Because we know how the way we deal with it is to indulge in a drink or drug of choice.
Yeah.
We never walk through it. We avoid it. And I think that's part of the learning process when you go into recovery, is that you've got to learn to walk through these things and to learn to deal with them and to meet them head on, because avoiding them and putting them on hold by using drink and drugs doesn't deal with it. It just puts it on the back burner. And it will come back later on to bite you, and it normally comes back and bites you harder than it would have potentially done beforehand. So I thought it was interesting the way that some of the guys did deal with their stress. I sort of related to Monty Panesar when he was saying that he got to points where we'd be on tour. The stress, it would just make him isolate in his room, and then he would sort of eat really bad junk food addictively. He'd order room service, he'd sit alone in his room, and he'd stew on his own thoughts, and he'd make himself feel better by eating sweet things, and wasn't dealing with the problem.
Do you think he ever got to the point where he was eating chocolate buttons in bed?
I suspect he probably did. And, eating chocolate in bed, you're in trouble when you're doing that over a long period, don't you?
Well, there's an interesting thing about it, because I must admit, I didn't watch the documentary when it was on Sunday, because obviously I'd seen it before. So there'll be some of it that's kind of fresh in your mind that isn't fresh in mine. But with something like the example you've just cited, I would imagine one of the difficulties for Monty Panesar would be that actually in part of the whole kind of drinking culture, that would have been very difficult for him anyway, because he wouldn't have drank, would he?
No, he's a Sikh, and I think that the Sikh people I've known and come across are always very lovely, gentle people, and I'd imagine that it would have had quite a trouble in fitting into those the pre-Andy Flower time when it was quite a hedonistic lifestyle. I mean, going back further than that, you remember when Beefy Botham was about, him and Viv Richards used to get together when they were on tour in the West Indies and go off to the hotels and smoke weed all day.
Yeah.
In fact, when I was writing my notes about that, I put about Ian Botham and Viv Richards. And for some reason, I put down Viv Anderson by mistake. Now, I'm sure he didn't. I'm sure he didn't go smoking weed with Viv Anderson, but you never know.
Brian Clough would have had something to say about that if he had.
He would have done, yes.
Young man.
But yeah, so moving into the new regime, you'd have thought perhaps he'd have found it easy, but he didn't. But it was the pressure on his on his spin bowling, which he'd had a reasonable amount of success with, and then it started to go wrong. And he was struggling with the pressure of it all.
So do you think, one of the things that it kind of made me wonder was when you obviously there's a kind of they're extreme examples because they're professional sportsmen and they're very much in the spotlight. But I wonder what you feel about how when someone has a kind of position of authority or they have some sort of responsibility in life that feels like a kind of significant burden, do you think that it's often that when people are struggling with those responsibilities, there's something in them that says, well, I need to fix this myself?
Totally. Yeah, it's a very good point, which is why we get quite a lot of people come in that are ex-military.
Right.
And it's initially they were, brought up to be strong and to be tough and to, go through some quite rigorous routines when they felt elements of stress, etc. And reaching out for help was the last thing they ever felt that they needed to do. But we've gradually seen. I went on a military mindset training course to understand what these guys have been through, and why they would turn into to drink and drugs, and they definitely didn't ask for help. It took a while for them to once we started to get one or two come to groups, others would join them, but it's been a long, slow process on that one. Definitely, yes.
You would have been somewhat in that position, wouldn't you? When you were struggling with drink, you were a business owner, you were a successful businessman, and I imagine there must have been a part of you that thought, in fact, you said it before, there have been a part of you that thought, well, I've got this under control, I can deal with this. There'd be so many other things that you were dealing with. Why would that be kind of any different?
Thinking back, I had a number of people working for me, and the art of delegation became, I had to get people to do more and more stuff for me effectively, which gave me then room to indulge further in my destructive behaviour.
There's also something there about you talking about people from the armed forces that have come into group. It kind of reminded me again of something we've spoken about before, which is people's definition of what strength is. If you're struggling with any sort of emotional difficulty, if your idea of strength is to kind of tough it out and sort it out yourself, which is certainly a very kind of traditionally masculine idea of strength, then you're kind of a million miles away from the definition of strength you really need in order to sort out those problems, which is recognising that holding your hand up and saying, I'm struggling here, I need someone to help me, is really the show of strength that you're in need of.
Which is why it's so important that it's getting the profile it is with mental health issues generally now. And I think, sportsmen are, because they're high profile and they can break when they reach a breaking point, they can get to a point where there is no other option than to ask for help. But that asking for help should come a lot earlier. And I think that came out. I think that came out in the documentary, when they were talking to Andy Flower afterwards about his management style and the way that he pushed them very, very hard. Looking back on it, he said he should have invested more time in not just the results that they were needed, but the general well-being of the cricketers under his control. He learnt a lesson from that. And I think generally society is learning a lesson that it's not to be treated as a weakness. It is very important. It's as important as physical health, and it needs to be taken seriously.
Yeah, I remember that bit in the documentary where Andy Flower's being asked about that, and I must admit, and maybe I'm being a cynic, but I must admit, I thought to myself, I wonder if you would change. I'm not sure you would, because in the end, he got the result that everybody wanted from him. He made the England cricket team the best in the world, effectively, and so I suppose there is an argument there to say, well, because that environment is a very testosterone-filled environment. And I suppose you could quite easily make the argument that says, well, if you can't cope in that environment, then you're going to go to the wall, and that's just the way it is. And I think that probably is the way that a lot of people, in a sense, that's the way a lot of people think about addiction, isn't it? Well, if you can't handle it, if you can't sort it out, then you've only got yourself to blame. I think it's very easy for society to turn their back on people who appear to be unable to cope with something, rather than realizing that actually we all have completely different ways of dealing with things, and it doesn't make us any less of a valuable human being just because we don't deal with it the same as the person next to us.
I mean, I think that the big turning point in the documentary for me, it's when England, they'd just beaten the West Indies in 2011 and they become the best team in the world. And they said, where do we go from here? And I think it's, there'd been a heavy schedule that had taken the toll on the players. They've been playing all versions of the cricket game to get to the point they'd got to. They'd reached the target they'd set themselves, and it was then the trying to maintain it, which is where the real pressure starts, isn't it?
Yes.
When I was looking to on YouTube and other sort of things about this, and there was a quote from Billie Jean King, who once said that pressure is a privilege. And I thought, I don't know, I'm not sure I agree with that one. But she saw it, to get to the top of your game, you're going to have pressure. And therefore, there's a lot of privileges of being at the top of your game with the money and the wealth and the fame, etc. I think, the fallout and the ramifications of living with that pressure are enormous.
Yeah, it is an interesting quote, because it made me immediately think about the stress curve. Stress is depicted as a curve, and if you're before the high point of the curve, that's the point where you don't have enough stress. There isn't enough pressure. So, any of us living a life without any sort of stress, it's boring. And so you're in danger there, particularly in your professional life, you're in danger there of rusting out because there's not enough to keep you occupied. And then you kind of hit the peak of the stress curve where you're at your optimum. And I guess that's what Billie Jean King's talking about. If you can hit that high point and you can stick at that high point and you can maintain that pressure, then, that is a kind of privileged position. And then when it tips over, when you're getting too much stress, too much anxiety, that's when, you're in burnout, where you just can't sustain that for very long. We can all sustain that for short periods of time, but if we try and expose ourselves to that for too long without the necessary kind of support structures, then we find that we can't cope with it.
It's having the support structures around you at that point when you most need it, and they're not there unless people know that you need them. Yeah,
and there's also something in when you were talking about the point in the documentary where you felt there was a kind of real shift. The idea of needing to maintain success and having to refocus yourself once you've achieved what your initial goal had been. You see that all the time, certainly in sport, don't you? That people always say it's much harder to win something the second time. Once you've won it once, that's fair enough. But actually holding on to it, defending your title is much more difficult. I mean, as a West Ham fan, I have no idea what that would be like. But what it did make me think about was the analogy you can draw between that and being in recovery. If you've spent years and years and years trying to get yourself to a point where you can give up, you can stop using whatever it is that has wrecked your life, then that's a massive, massive target to focus on. And when you reach the point where you've done that, then you're into the very, very hard graft of sustaining it, day after day after day after year after year after year. And that is, that's the grind of what recovery is, right?
Exactly right. I mean, it's stopping is the easy part in many ways, especially if you go into a detox unit where you're getting the withdrawal drugs given to you. You're getting this massive support around you. You can walk out after 10 days from the detox unit without any alcohol in your system. But that's when the hard work starts. It's staying stopped is the most difficult part of the whole process. I mean, you do get that point at the start. I think the parallel you draw is very relevant, because that we've talked about this sort of pink fluffy cloud that you get when you first go into recovery, which can last, a few weeks, maybe 3 or 4 months, where everything's brilliant and you're so pleased you've given up and you're so proud of your achievement. And then you reach this plateau, and it's kicking on from that plateau to maintain your recovery, which is really important. Which is why the community groups and the peer support groups come into their own, because you can't do it. You can't do it on your own at that point. You can very easily just walk back into your old ways and end up exactly where you were beforehand. I liked the way that the players were very honest. I remember Kevin Peterson was saying about him breaking down in the changing rooms, as other players did at that point. And I think it was Jonathan Trott was actually crying when he was out at the crease. Yeah. You know, it got to that point where, you know, the old fight or flight situation, he was still fighting very hard at that point. He was out at the crease with tears in his eyes. It wasn't just the speed of the balls coming in at him. It was just dealing with the whole pressure of being an England cricketer at that point.
Yeah, I mean that's the. I think one of the things that really struck home for me watching that documentary, and I would urge even people who have no interest whatsoever in cricket to watch it, because it's a really interesting study on human behaviour. But one of the things, you know, obviously having played a bit of cricket myself, in fact, I played with you once or twice, didn't we? We used to play the standard life cricket team, and
we did.
The majority of the fun in that was usually afterwards in the Queen Anne.
It was exactly right. Again, it combines two passions of mine.
Yeah, again, cricket and drinking?
Well, sport and drinking, really. I was never a big cricket fan. I did like it. I mean, I loved going to cricket. And again, as a heavy drinker, it was just fantastic. It really was. I remember
you've day at it at the cricket, haven't you? I mean, you've got a really nice long session there if you go to cricket.
Yeah, you have. I mean, I went to the Oval on several occasions to watch England play. I remember Legal and General used to run a trip every year, and they always used to say, "Oh, do come along because I know you enjoy it," and that sort of thing. And I didn't really, I couldn't tell you now who England were playing on those occasions. It was just an absolute drinking fest. I mean, the times that I didn't make it home, or I remember falling asleep on the train and waking up in Dover on one occasion, you know, and that's quite a difficult one to ring your wife and try and get her to pick you up from Dover. Because the trains have all finished and she's disappointed in your behaviour, to say the least.
Yeah, you're probably somewhat worse for wear as well.
I was in a terrible state. But I think I remember I was on holiday in Sri Lanka once, and we'd gone to Sri Lanka, and the England cricket team were due over that summer. All right, so there's billboards as you come out at the airport. There's billboards everywhere about the England cricket team and that sort of thing. And all I was interested in really was how long it was going to take me to get from the airport to the hotel, so I could start drinking, because I was starting to withdraw. I remember that, and I remember after about 3 or 4 days being in Sri Lanka, I got a terrible tummy bug, and the doctor came to see me. And he came to see me in my room, and he wasn't really interested in my ailment. All he wanted to talk to me was about the cricket. And he was, and because I was from England, he expected that I knew everything about cricket, and I really didn't. All I could remember I think it was Muralitharan was playing for Sri Lanka at the time, and that was about it, you know. And he even had he had 3 nurses come in with him, these student nurses coming in, and they were all prodding and poking my tummy, and they were talking about the cricket as well. But
you were more interested in the local beer, I should imagine.
I was. I remember also. It sounds like I've been travelling a lot, but when I went on honeymoon. I went to Antigua, and I was more interested in going up to from our hotel was in Half Moon Bay down the south of the island, and going back up to near where the airport was, because I knew that I wanted to take I wanted my picture taken in Vivi Richards Street, and going to see the old recreation grounds, you know, where the international cricket was played. Yeah. It's not really good, but on top of that, I also wanted to get involved in the in the rum, because there was very cheap rum there. It was incredibly powerful, and I think I spent a lot of my honeymoon just sourcing the local rum and getting it as cheaply as I possibly could, and drinking as much of it as I could.
You'd actually fit in quite well with the Barmy Army.
If I had the money to do so now, I probably would go. Yeah.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't be the best place for a recovering alcoholic.
Not really. not really.
Actually, the point I was making about half an hour ago when I disappeared off at a tangent talking about playing cricket for standard life, and I think that the reason my mind was taken to that was because of those fantastic buffets that Jim used to put on after the games.
He did, didn't he?
Amazing,
yes, he did.
Amazing spread of food. Anyway, never mind that. What I was saying was, in the documentary, and that's right, because I was urging everyone to watch it if they have any sort of interest in human nature. But the thing that really brought home for me was what an incredibly tough, brutal game international cricket is.
Yes, I didn't appreciate the ramifications of playing at that high level for so long in such a tough environment.
Yeah, you know, when you think of cricket, you think of it as a very sort of genteel sport that's really not got any rough edges at all. But when you watch that, you realise that if you're going to be a success at that level of international cricket, you have got to have you've got to have a pretty thick skin to be able to cope with it. And, of course, being in any environment that requires you to have enormous levels of resilience, he's going to test your resolve.
Yes. I didn't quite know how to respond to that. I think yes. You're right. No,
yes, we'll do.
I was looking at my notes to see where I was going to be going next, because I've wandered all over and not sitting in my normal position at the desk, because it's too painful to sit at the desk. I've had to sort of slump on my sofa. I'm not in control of this situation, and I'm not enjoying it.
No, well, we should probably wind up there, because I don't want to put your recovery, your physical recovery, in jeopardy.
No, good. Thank you very much. It's nice of you to show some sort of sympathy, which I've received very little from you so far.
That's not true at all. I asked you last night if you wanted anything. To which you responded, vodka and Charlie, as I recall.
Yes, that would have been one of my older responses from many years ago, and it just came out at that time, because I thought the irony was good.
All right. So, have you got anything else pressing on your notes?
No, I haven't. The only thing I hadn't touched upon was I thought about the part of the documentary which I did find funny is when they were all called to go away on a team building exercise. They said, and they were told just to come to the airport with their passport, and they thought they were going to Munich, and they thought they were going to go to a beer festival, and they ended up going on that Special Forces training camp, which I could see the disappointment. I would have felt exactly the same.
Yeah, there'd have been a mutiny, wouldn't there?
There would have been a mutiny, but it was brutal, wasn't it? The training camp they went on as well.
Absolutely brutal, yeah, and freezing cold, from what I remember.
Yeah, it was, yeah. But anyway, yes. I've run out of my notes. I did have other notes on different aspects of dealing with pressure and that sort of thing, but not really appropriate at this stage, I don't feel. We can do another one. Yeah,
we can do it on another occasion when you're feeling a bit more compos mentis.
Yes. Yeah,
I think you've been pretty much like Joe Root there, working your way through a very gritty innings, the pain of which is evident.
Yeah, I've blocked a few deliveries. I've just stood at the crease for as long as I can and let the guy from the other end make all the runs, i.e. you.
Yeah, you've been worried about some googlies, haven't you? You've been worried about your googlies.
More than worried, mate, honestly.
Right, I'll let you get back to lying on the sofa and watching Judge Judy.
Yeah, thanks, mate.
All right, mate. Well, take care, and I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, will do.
All right.
Cheers, dude.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Sideways was created by Graham Landy and Martin Pankhurst. If you want to read more about our work, visit grahamlandywellbeing.co.uk/sideways-podcast. You can follow us on Twitter or on our Facebook page at Sideways Podcast, and you can email us to let us know what you think of the show and with anything else that you'd like to ask us. Finally, we want to thank you for listening and ask that if you've enjoyed what you've heard, that you spread the word. And we'll see you next week.
I was walking round my local
store, searching for the 10 pence off Lenore, when suddenly I bumped into this guy. On seeing who it was, I gave a cry. Fucking hell, it's Fred Titmus.